Morning, everybody. And obviously, today there's been the media, wall to wall media coverage about D Day and about the great sacrifice that our forefathers paid, the great price are paid. And I want to read something from the Bible. It's from John's Gospel, John 15, verse 13. It says this: Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. And I think that one verse, obviously it's talking about Jesus Christ, but that one verse talks about every single soldier that lays down his life for his country, but particularly in the struggle in the Second World War. It was against totalitarianism. It was against Nazism. It was against supremacism. It was against the very things that we see rising again today. I'm not talking about rising among the populations of Western Europe. It's a great evil that's rising, and it's rising on the left. It's rising among religious fanatics, and it is rising to a small extent on the right side of politics, but it's minuscule. But the main threat today is from religious totalitarianism and hard left totalitarianism. I want to look very quickly at the price that men paid. These are just stats, and stats never really mean anything. But I want us to think about every single one of these people I'm going to mention was a son, a husband, a lover, a father, a man who had dreams, who had a future, who had talents, who had abilities, a unique individual. Every single human being is unique, and every single human being is precious. All life is sacred. On that day, 4,414 Allied troops died in one day. And I often say this: if CNN or Sky News had been on the beaches of Normandy, there would have been cries going out throughout the country to stop the slaughter. But the reality is that operation is the operation that helped break the backbone of Nazism. Of course, the Russian communists, and many of them, much as I hate communism and despise it with a passion, I believe it's equally as evil as Nazism. But those Russian soldiers were fighting with absolute incredible courage on the Eastern Front and giving the Nazis a massively difficult time and making great advances. And the British, the Americans, the Canadians, the Australians, they stormed those beaches of Normandy. What courage does it take when the door of that landing craft goes down and there are men falling to the left and the right of you, and you keep going and you keep charging on and you keep fighting with men literally getting blown to bits, men that you've trained with, men that you've known, men that are the same age as you, from the same background as you, some of them from the same town as you, falling to your right-hand side and your left-hand side. Horrendous injuries, horrendous brutality. But they were doing it for right. They were doing it because they were on the right side of history. And I often think, what would happen if we were in that situation today? Would the young men of this generation rally to the cause and rise to the challenge? Now, there's a lot of talk, and I don't want to get political today, but there's a lot of talk about what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. I don't think we can compare the two. This was a direct threat to the United Kingdom of invasion. This was a situation where the whole of Western Europe, where settled countries had been conquered by a lunatic, crazed dictatorship run by one psychopathic man with a cabal of evil men around him. That's what we were fighting against in the Second World War. It was pure evil, pure evil. And when we look back at it, and we look back at the price those men paid, and we look at what's happening in the country now, we've got to ask a question. What would the men that stormed those beaches of Normandy think about what's happening in the country? Think about the way our country has been betrayed and sold out. The Battle of Normandy went on for several weeks, and 73,000 Allies, 73,000 young men laid down their lives to liberate France. 153,000 were wounded, and 20,000 French civilians were killed by Allied bombing. And actually, the interesting thing, the people of Normandy are some of the friendliest people when it comes to the Brits and the Americans. So even though they lost thousands of casualties in Allied bombing raids, they realized that a price had to be paid for their liberty. And liberty always has to be fought for. We can't just leave it to someone else. We've got to stand for freedom. And the struggle that our country is going into, thankfully, is not a physical struggle. And let's hope it never becomes a physical struggle. But it's a struggle where men and women who may live comfortable, happy, easy lives have got to realize that for your children and your grandchildren, unless you take a stand now, there will be no future. The future that our forefathers paid for in their precious blood will be squandered because we can't be bothered. We can't be bothered to take a stand. We're too scared of what people might say about us. We're too scared of what people might say because we're standing up against the modern totalitarianism. Believe you me, there is a creeping soft totalitarianism that is encroaching on every one of our lives, and we've got to stand against that. We've got to fight it. Let's just today have a time when we remember what our forefathers did, when we remember what soldiers, literally younger than my son, a few years older than my grandson's 13 years old, men 3, 4, 5 years older than my grandson were storming those beaches of Normandy. And they weren't boys, they were men. Greater love has no man than this, that he should lay down his life for his friends. What would you lay down for the future of your children and your grandchildren? They gave it all, and we owe them to do the same in our generation. See you all soon.